I'm Nancy Wright. I'm an attorney from Gainesville, Florida, and my practice primarily involves representing children or adults who have developmental disabilities or children with complex medical conditions. So a lot of my practice involves Medicaid. And today I want to talk to you about what do you do about Medicaid when permanency is achieved. A lot of these children, especially children with developmental disabilities, end up in the system because their families have not had adequate services and the families have been ill-equipped to deal with the particular problems that come to play with a child with disabilities. So you don't want to go back to where you came from, what caused you to be in this situation in the first place, and you want to make sure that there are going to be services in place for that child once permanency is established. It may not be Medicaid, but that's probably the best service to get for these children, the ones that, and the service that has the widest range of benefits. So let's talk about how you might want to achieve permanency and keep Medicaid if possible. So one of the many ways that Medicaid is divided up is by the way that you establish eligibility. Now, all of Medicaid deals with situations where the family or the individual has limited income and assets. But the way that you qualify for Medicaid depends on your category. The first and most assured way to qualify is to get what's called SSI, or Supplemental Security Income. Anyone who qualifies for that, and it can be a child, automatically gets Medicaid in the state of Florida. The problem with SSI-related Medicaid is that SSI itself, Supplemental Security Income, is a type of welfare benefit, and it requires that you meet a certain financial, low level of financial resources and income. Before a child turns 18, that includes parental income. So on reunification, if a child is under the age of 18, the parental income may actually knock a child off of SSI and therefore knock them off of Medicaid if they don't qualify some other way. The good news is that when a child turns 18, the parental income is no longer deemed. So, so many times children who can't get Medicaid before 18 can get Medicaid afterwards. The second type of what's called SSI-related Medicaid is institutional care or home and community-based service Medicaid, which is provided under a waiver program. If a child is placed into an institution, or if a child is enrolled in a home and community-based service program like the Developmental Disabilities Waiver, then that child is considered to be a, quote, household of one. And once again, you don't have to look at parental income or assets for that child to be able to get Medicaid. The other type of Medicaid is called family-related Medicaid. And for this, as of, I believe, last year, there's no longer any asset test for that. It's all based on income, and the income level is based on what's called the federal poverty limit. So from birth to age 1, there's a child would qualify for family-related Medicaid by having a limit of, the household limit of 200% of the federal poverty level or less. From 1 to 19, it's 135%. 19 to 20, it's 100% of the federal poverty level. And by the way, the federal poverty level is super low. People can't really live effectively on the federal poverty level, and you can look it up online. There are charts all over. Another part of family-related Medicaid is Medicaid will be provided to a child if when they age out of foster care up to the age of 26. And but that only qualifies if the child is in foster care when they age out. And then the third type of Medicaid, which is what people in dependency are primarily familiar with, is called child in care. And that's the type of Medicaid that children who are in the dependency system may be getting pretty much solely because they're in the dependency system. Any child, regardless of their family's income or assets, will get child in care Medicaid if they're placed in emergency shelter, if they're placed in foster care, if they're foster care youth in independent living, and for children up to age 18 whose adopted parents receive an adoption subsidy. So what are you going to do in preparation for permanency? A lot of it depends on what type of permanency you're looking at. For adoption, that's pretty easy. Adoption, you get an adoption subsidy, you automatically get Medicaid. It turns off at the age of 18, but at that point you can look at other options, and including SSI if the child meets the qualifications for SSI, meaning that the child would have to be disabled by the standards of the Social Security Administration. If you're going to place the child in permanent guardianship, or either with a relative or in a non-relative placement, the child in care Medicaid continues as long as the dependency is open. But the child then will be considered to be a household of one as long as their parents are not living with them. So DCF, Department of Children and Families, is the organization that determines this sort of financial eligibility, and then they should look to see if the child is going to qualify based on their own income and not on the income of the relative placement or the foster parents. Reunification, that probably presents the biggest problem because you now have the parents in the household. So their income is automatically going to be considered, except under certain conditions. The biggest one is if a child is enrolled in a waiver program. At that point, the parent income doesn't apply, which is a big reason for trying to get a child enrolled into the waiver program. What happens if you are reunifying and you want to make sure that services continue for that child, but you really think that the income of the family is going to be too high? Well, the first thing is obviously trying to make sure that the child gets enrolled in a waiver program. And there are other trainings that I'm offering that you might want to look at, but one of them involves how that can help you in more than one ways, and how you can get out of the long waiting list for some of these waiver programs on reunification. Another thing to look at, it's not Medicaid, but it's insurance that really is pretty decent. And it's the Kid Care program, and that's through Children's Health Insurance Program, which is a federally funded, partially federally funded program. That includes Medikids and Healthy Kids. And that program will allow you to purchase insurance for a hugely reduced rate, premium, like $15 or $20 a month, as long as the family is making a certain limited income. And then even if that family goes above that income, you can actually full pay for that insurance, and it usually costs maybe around $200 a month. But sometimes, because the insurance benefits are pretty decent, that may end up being a better route to go, is to go ahead and full pay for the Kid Care program. Another option is called Medically Needy Medicaid. That would take like about 4 hours in training to fully explain, and even then it would be confusing. But Medically Needy Medicaid is based on the household share of cost. So essentially, Medicaid kicks in on a monthly basis as soon as the medical expenses by Medicaid providers hits the share of cost. There are a lot of different ways to use it, in ways that it really doesn't require you to actually pay out the share of cost, depending on what type of service you're trying to access. It's a pretty complicated program, and it's run through DCF. But that's definitely an option if a child has, for instance, very high prescription medication expenses. Another thing to think of is trying to get a child supplemental security income if they meet the disability criteria when they turn 18. So I've done other trainings on Medicaid that you might want to access, especially the training that involves services for children with developmental disabilities, or the training on whether the Medicaid or the Medicaid waiver is something that you want to use. And in both of those, I give a little bit more information on how you might try to enroll a child into one of those waiver programs and what the eligibility criteria is. Thank you.